Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Barbara Porso, and I am the Director for the Center for Professional Accounting Practices. We have established a new initiative called Professional in Practice, and I am delighted to introduce our very first guest speaker. Not only is he one of the most esteemed members of Fordham alum, but he is also a dear friend. Ed Strohs. Let me tell you a little bit about Ed Strohs. He is a native New Yorker, graduated from the Gabelli School of Business with a BS in accounting. Like me, he graduated in 1979, and he worked as a bank examiner and then as an auditor for Deloitte, where he became a CPA. And in 1984, he became a special agent with the FBI. He specialized in white-collar crime and did investigations in New York and in Texas. And then in 2000, he left the government service and started a computer forensic company and cybersecurity firm. The name of the firm? Strohs Friedberg. And this company grew to over 500 employees, over 14 offices worldwide. And in 2016, he sold the company to Aon, and he is now co-president of Aon Cyber Solutions. Do you know there is actually a Harvard Business School case featuring the subject of Ed? He has lectured at Harvard University, Carnegie Mellon, and many other prestigious universities, and for his alma mater, Fordham University. It is with great honor and privilege that I introduce our first video installment for Professional in Practice, Ed Strohs.
Hi, my name is Ed Strohs, fellow Fordham person, and I would just like to thank you for giving me your attention, Fordham friends and family. You should know that I am not only a Fordham graduate, but a former member of the Board of Trustees, now a trustee fellow. I majored in business while at Fordham, and I graduated in 1979. Since then, I've done a number of things in my career, and besides being a certified public accountant, the thing that I'm mostly known for is cybersecurity and cyber investigations. What I thought we could do in this video is let me just leave you with some thoughts that may be helpful to you in your career. They may be especially helpful in the context of an interview when you're going for a job. Because no matter what you have studied at Fordham, and no matter what your major is, everybody's interested in cyber and cybersecurity. So I'm going to orient a couple of points, and I'm going to think primarily about people who have majored in accounting, but it does not have to be limited to that. My career spanned the early 80s when I was a bank examiner. I worked for what is now one of the big four as an auditor. I had a brief period as a corporate controller. Then I became an agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was an FBI agent for 16 years, mostly specializing in white-collar crime in Texas and New York. But the last 4 years of my career, from 96 to 2000, I formed and supervised the Computer Crime Squad for the FBI's New York office, and really specialized in understanding how digital evidence and computers were going to change the investigative landscape and the kind of evidence that would come into existence because people were using computers so much. Now, I don't have to tell any of you that you have computers all around you, some that you own and some that are owned by others. And when you step into any business context today, you're going to have quite a bit of computerized evidence that you deal with. So let's put it in the context of what is it good to know about cybersecurity, and how would you might refer to that in an interview, in talking with people. Well, first of all, I think when you sit into an interview, you want to stand out as an individual. An interviewer and a company is hiring you. They're making a decision about whether to hire you as a human being, not your school, not your diploma, but you as an individual. And if you can come across as somebody who would get along well with their people, and also that you have been thoughtful in being a loyal, productive employee, you're going to do well in an interview. So let's think about sort of like you have a specialty, whether it's accounting or marketing or management or finance, whatever it might be. That is your specialty, and that is a very powerful starting point. But there are many people who have those degrees. So the important thing is, how do you come across to be advantageous, have an advantage over other people? Well, some points that you could make is to keep in mind that the accounting systems that all business use are based on double entry bookkeeping, debits and credits. And it's deceptively simple. It seems like a simple system, but when you work with it as a professional, as an auditor, you realize it's really an ingenious system for performing the function of taking care of a company's assets and recording its liabilities and measuring its efficiency. There is a term that you don't hear very much anymore, but it is still operative and it's still relevant under the law, that employees of a company, of a corporation, are the stewards of assets. They owe a duty of stewardship over the assets, and stewardship basically means management with care. So the double entry bookkeeping system is what we use to account for our assets and how they are disposed of and how they are utilized. The accounting model is terrific. It has been around for about 500 years or more. And you can make that point. A lot of people aren't aware of that. Show me another mechanism that has been around for 500 years and has withstood the test of time. There aren't too many. The double entry bookkeeping system has. Now, I want you to show in an interview that you also have an understanding of the limitations of the double entry bookkeeping system. And the limitations come down to the fact that in the 21st century, in today's world, many assets that a company has that are valuable to investors don't even appear on the balance sheet. For example, trade secrets, brand reputation, sometimes even things that a company could patent or copyright and didn't. And if they do have it on the balance sheet, it may be at a much smaller value. It may be showing just the cost of acquiring it rather than the value. So as a stewardship of assets, you can tell an employer that you are aware of the strengths of the accounting model, but you're also aware of some of its limitations. One example would be in intellectual property. Now, another example is that almost all general ledgers today and accounting systems are computerized. It goes without saying. And anything that becomes computerized means that it is now in the form of a series of computer files in an application. And you can speak to this by showing that you have some understanding of how computerized files and computerized systems can be vulnerable to adversarial action, hacking, and other things that the double entry bookkeeping system can't completely get its arms around. You need to think in new ways and show yourself as a student that you've anticipated this, that you've thought about how your skills and your specialty is strong, but you've thought about how to connect it to other specialties and that there's an interrelationship between the two. For example, one point that you could make, someone asks you, well, tell me more about this, it sounds interesting. You say, yes, I've been thoughtful about this. I've studied cybersecurity, and I know that when a security event occurs in a computerized environment, it attacks one or more of three qualities of the data in that system. The quality of its confidentiality, the quality of its data integrity, or the quality of the data availability. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Think of it by its initials, CIA. An attack on confidentiality would be somebody getting into a computer system and copying the information that's there. If it's a trade secret and they copy it, it's no longer a trade secret because somebody else knows it. Data integrity means that the information that you have in the system should not be changed. should not be altered. So even though it's still there, we're not saying it's copied, but it's been altered, and I'm going to give you an example of that before we finish this discussion. And the third one on availability. Availability means that the data is not available to a legitimate user. If you've read anything in the newspaper about ransomware, where hackers get into a computer, encrypt the contents of the computer so it cannot be used, unless the victim pays a ransom, usually in Bitcoin, that's an example of ransomware. That's an example of an attack on availability. The fact that you can even speak to those three things and show that that's how cybersecurity manifests itself in the 21st century will show that you are a broader thinker than just focusing on the strengths of your specialty. Now, I would just say if somebody is looking for a specific example or not sure, you probably don't know this book, The Cuckoo's Egg. It's one of the first books written about cybersecurity in a real live incident where a foreign adversary had penetrated an American research laboratory on the West Coast and copied sensitive information. And the reason that I hold it up for you and show it to you is that the way that computer hack was discovered, an attack on confidentiality, is that the hackers disturbed an accounting system by accident on the computerized network. And by disturbing that computerized system, the books of account, they made a change and put the books out of balance by 75 cents. Now, 75 cents doesn't sound like it's worth tracking down, but you don't measure the significance by that. You measure the significance by saying, why are the books even out of balance? And that was the question that came about. They should never be out of balance. What caused this? And by looking into it, they found that the hackers, which was a nation-state penetration, had gotten in and accidentally disturbed the accounting system. And that opened the door and showed people that there were other things that had to be looked at. That case goes back to the very late 80s. The book was written in the early 90s. It's still relevant. You can look it up on the internet. You can get the book yourself. But just think, if you can point out that as an accountant or as a finance professional, that you can talk about all the strengths about what you know how to do, how you do it, that you're a loyal and thoughtful employee, and you've even thought about how your strengths sort of stop and connect with another field and their strengths. And you can even cite an example where accounting skills in an out-of-balance condition showed an example of a computer hack. I don't think there's a lot of other people who will be able to talk about those types of things. At the end, you end the interview, you should be able to come across as a thoughtful professional, somebody who thinks not only within the strengths that they have, but how it relates to other areas, to be that steward over assets, that loyal employee, and not just a trained functionary with a specialty. And that's the tradition that Fordham has always sought to instill in its people. And I wish you all the best. If this bit of information is helpful to you in your career, it would be deeply gratifying to me. And I wish you all the best, and thank you for your time.